Right, good morning, grade 12. I'm going to continue with the work that we've done. I'm setting this up. Okay. All right. We're going to continue with the imperfect markets. We're going to continue with oligopolies today. Right. When you do oligopolies, sorry about that. Let's move this a little bit up. Okay. Right. When we do oligopolies, you need to understand that it is basically similar to a monopolist. Okay. So if we do the same characteristics that you find in a monopoly, very similar characteristics will be found in an oligopoly. All right. So an oligopoly is when you've got a few or a small number of large companies that influence the supply of the product or service in the market. Right. So they can control the supply, and therefore, because they're controlling the quantity, they can also influence the price and the profit. Right. Example of an oligopoly would be OPEC, would be, there's a couple of organizations. And further on, we've already looked at a few, but further on, you'll have more examples like Shell and Engine are examples also. All right. If I've only got two organizations that share a market, so there's only two participants, we call it a duopoly. Right, so that's the meaning of the word duopoly. Right, next. Let's look at the characteristics in more detail. The first one that you need to remember is that because there's only a few suppliers, there's limited competition. Okay, right, that's a very important characteristic. The next one that you need to remember is that your product can either be homogeneous or differentiated. Now, people try and have differentiated products so that the characteristic is more in line with a monopoly than an oligopoly. Okay, right. Monopolies don't always make an economical profit. It depends on how you manage it. Okay, remember that. Okay. Then in this market, because there is a limited amount of people participating, they are interdependent. So there's a mutual dependency in the market, and they can therefore influence each other's decisions, which is why collusion is so much easier to occur in this organization for. Right. So they can influence each other's prices. All right. And those influencing each other's prices often lead to price wars and often lead to all kinds of other problems. Right. Let's continue. Because of the price wars and consequent loss of market share, because they do that, businesses would rather use non-price measures to convince people to participate in their market. So in order to increase their market share, they will use things like advertising, after-sale services, etc., to differentiate. Remember the two important P's, packaging and presentation. So if your presentation is so much superior, then people are rather going to buy your product simply because it looks so much more glamorous or so much more presentable to the eye, which is why they rather do that. Okay. Producers have considerable, not total, but considerable control, less than a perfect market or a monopolistic competition, but they've got more control than them, but obviously not as much as a monopoly. Okay, monopoly is the market form that's got the most control. But even a monopoly is limited to the reaction of the consumers. So if the consumers refuse to budge, they will find an alternative, even if it is less desirable. Okay, right. Oligopolies, we have a cartel, and a cartel is an example, as I said to you previously, of a abnormal organization, and it's illegal. And we don't want that. So they can have abnormally high profits because they decide jointly. So they actually act as a monopolist, okay? All right, rather than an oligopoly, okay? In your oligopolies, entry into the market is not easy, often because of the large capital outlay or simply brand loyalty. People won't buy an alternative than those 4 or 5 things simply because they don't believe in any other one. They don't think anybody else can do it. Right. Now, the next thing that you need to know is an oligopoly curve looks similar to a monopoly. It's just less. Your elasticity of demand is just less. Okay. Right. However, there is situations where you've got a dualist scenario in your demand curve. Now, there was a economist with the name of Paul Sweezy that developed this kinked demand curve theory that you need to understand. It's only in oligopoly that you find this, and it's only one example that can occur but it doesn't always happen. So your demand curve consists out of 2 sections. The top section is relatively high prices, it's very elastic, and it's very sensitive to demand. So price change is relatively rapid. The bottom part, it has you've got relative low price changes because of a very high inelasticity of demand. So it is not as sensitive to price changes, okay? Right, I am going to go through the graph below. This is a different graph than what you've got in New Era, in your Mind the Gap. It just gives a little bit more information, which is why I'm giving you this graph, but you can look at the one in Mind the Gap. It's also acceptable. This just gives you a bit more insight into the elasticity that you studied in grade 11. If you're unsure about elasticity, please go and look at the presentations that Mrs. Boerters did on that work for the grade 11 work. Okay, right, here we go. Here is the demand curve that is kinked for the oligopolist. So we've got the blue part and the red part. Now, this average revenue is the demand curve. Remember, I said to you, AR can be used interchangeably with demand. So the top part, relative elastic, the bottom part, relative inelastic, top part, sensitive, bottom part, not so sensitive. Okay? So that's the demand part that you must understand. And that's what they normally ask you in the exams, is the demand curve itself. However, over here, I've also included the marginal revenue curve. Now, I want you to see where my kink is there. That is the point that the oligopolist is going to have its price and its output. So that's where the market, this specific market, will produce. So Q1 will be the quantity and P1 will be the price. Okay. Now, what you need to understand is they won't do it higher and they won't do it lower. And you need to be able to answer why they won't do it higher and why they won't do it lower. Right. Why won't they do it higher? I want you to see, if I were to put it higher, if I have a price that's, say, over there, look what happens to the quantity. Do you see the quantity is almost half if I use that price over there? Okay, so that's not cool. So I'm not making as much profit. It's not possible to make as much profit because I'm not producing as much. If I were to decrease the price significantly, so we say we do it over there, okay, and I go to the side and I get my demand curve and I go down, the change in quantity that increased does not guarantee the same amount of profit. So it's not worthwhile for us to go and produce higher or lower. That would be the optimal point. Okay. Now, remember when we're doing the kinked curve, or when we're doing the kinked curve, or when we're doing any of these markets, my profit maximization occurs where marginal cost and marginal revenue intersect. Now, in this case, I've got two marginal cost curves. So that means my profit maximization point for this organization is going to be anywhere between there and there. So if my average cost can be anywhere between those two, I will be able to make an economical profit. All right. So that's what they're going to want to do. So they're going to try and keep their costs between there and there. Okay. So your average, your smiley face, your average cost curve would be either over there, or we'll try and have it over there if I've got, if I'm part of the relative elastic demand, or if I am part of the other, I'm going to obviously want to have it. Where's my curve? There. Okay. All right. So please remember that. That's kind of important. Okay. Right. So obviously, the lower my average cost curve is, the higher the amount of profit that I can make in that specific organization, or that specific scenario. Right. Okay. Non-price competition. I say to you in the introduction presentation that my non-price competition, you need to study both for oligopolies and monopolies. Please don't forget that. Okay. So this is an 8-mark question or more. It can be up to 16 marks, so please just keep that in mind. Okay. An oligopoly, we don't want the price wars. So to prevent the price wars, we use non-price measures to elicit people to increase my market share. So remember the pie charts that we've looked at in class? The bigger your market share, obviously, the more you're going to be able to sell, etc., etc. So how do organizations do it? They do it with brand loyalty. They do it with product recognition. How many children know the letter M way before they can actually read or write? Simply because M stands for, all right. So that's my point. Okay. And then obviously other forms of product differentiation. So this is done by means of advertising and marketing. So within your branding, you're going to have your different products. Now remember that what's the difference between branding and marketing and advertising? When we're looking at branding, we're looking at the brand name of the organization, of the franchise, etc. When we're looking at marketing and or advertising, we're looking at a specific product within that brand that we want to increase sales of. And that's where the differentiation comes in often. So you will have Vodacom will have 10 special offers, or MTN will have 10 special offers. And that 10 special offers, they will then go and advertise. So at the moment with COVID-19, there's a a lot of advertising simply aimed at trying to increase market share for after Corona. And when that, do you understand what I'm saying? So there's a lot of activity in the marketing and in branding to try and increase market niches by trying to convince people through their gimmicks that they are the people to go to. Okay, right. They're trying to increase product recognition, etc., etc. So don't be, use any offers and things that come your way that can improve your life, but be mindful of what they're actually doing. Okay. And a substantial amount of money is pushed into this, okay? Because obviously it's survival of the fittest at the moment. So keep that in mind, okay? What type of forms of non-competition is there? Extended shopping hours. So obviously at the moment that's kind of very difficult to do. Business over the internet, that's booming. Any business that didn't do it before is now doing it. After sales service, offering additional services like exchanging advice, etc., etc. Door-to-door delivery, very important now, and other things like convincing you that the product is superior because it runs better on as a lubricant or oil, etc., etc. So as I said, in the petrol industry, we've got Shell, BP, Caltex. Then there's a number of smaller ones, and then in the banking industry, we've got FNB, ABSA, Nedbank, Standard Bank. Those are the big ones. Capitec. Right. The more competition there is in a market, obviously, the better the price is going to be. Okay, let's go and look at collusion. As I said to you, collusion is a bad thing. It is disastrous to the market because it creates an opportunity for businesses to function as an oligopoly, which destroys other organizations. And so other companies, smaller companies, small and medium companies don't have that's not part of the collusion process are then basically stabbed in the back and they cease to function and the market niche, these organizations, market niches and grow, but the smaller businesses can't compete and therefore they cease to exist and the nucleus of businesses shrink, which means competition shrinks, which means there's more likelihood of higher prices, etc., etc. All right, a formal agreement between organizations. Okay, a cartel is one of these where they restrict the quantity supplied, which then lets them act as a oligopolist, a monopoly, and they fix their prices, they fix their supply, and they fix the competition. Please remember that this is illegal. Right. If it is found, and if you are found that you're cutting prices and that you're acting illegally, then we will be dealing with the Competition Commission, etc., which you should have looked at in chapter 6. Okay. I do have notes on that I will send you still, I think, somewhere. I remember that. Okay, right. This is called overt or formal collusion. So it is traceable. There's another word for it that is in some of the other textbooks. Please add it into your notes. So overt is the bad one. Okay, right. It's forbidden in most countries. It's definitely forbidden in South Africa. However, there is organizations that were created prior to the legislation internationally that prohibited it. So, bang goes that. All right. The next one is where I've got a situation where I've got in my pie chart. So say, for instance, I draw a pie chart over here. I've got a number of people that about half for one organization. They're the largest. They've got the largest market share. So if they decide, because they're the dominant firm, to change the prices, the others will be stupid not to follow their example. So this is called tacit collusion, and that is legal. Okay. So if your rivals follow what you're doing, then that's acceptable. And that's oligopolies. I hope you understood. Have a good day, sir.